Hello and welcome back. Thanks for joining me for another installment of No One is Talking About This. I think we probably have about 3 more sessions together before this book ends. And then, I have lots of thoughts about this, and I'll just say a few of them once we're done. But for now, let's just jump back into where we were. She remembered the peculiar onrushing pain of the portal, where everything was happening except for this. But for now, the previous unshakable conviction that someone else was writing the inside of her head was gone. All the worries about what a mind was fell away as soon as the baby was placed in her arms. A mind was merely something trying to make it in the world. The baby, like a soft pink machete, swung and chopped her way through the living leaves. A path was a path was a path was a path. A path was a person, and a path was a mind. Walk, chop, walk, chop. How she wished she had never read that article about octopus intelligence, because now every time she sliced into a charred tentacle among blameless new potatoes, she thought to herself, I am eating a mind, I am eating a mind, I am eating a fine grasp of the subject at hand. When the baby was put to the breast for the first time, she hovered behind her sister's shoulder to document it, with her phone sealed in a disinfected Ziploc so that all the photos she took appeared to take place in heaven. Her sister's neck from the side had the smooth poured texture of a bird bath, rising and rising. The winged thing, pink, blink, blurred cardinal, lit on her surface and drank. She herself was named Godmother, a word she could never hear without seeing a wand turning things into other things. A tap on the forehead, always on the forehead, and then the bursting of mousy outlines into static, wide white, the wide sky. So good, the nurses crooned when they saw the baby in her scratchy white baptismal gown with a broad chuckle in her eye at their earnest little human ceremony. She flooded with triumph as the priest poured water from his chipped seashell, because here at last was a child religion could not frighten. Here was a child who could not be made to dread the afterlife. She found herself so excited by the baby that she could hardly stand it. She was doing so well. She was stupendous. In every reaching cell of her, she was a genius, just like the man with the basketball, whose body always knew what to do. Her eyes traveled and traveled, though she could not see, would not be able to see. It was immediately clear. There were drops of wild dragon scale fluorescence where her irises ought to be. So what? That every person on earth might be watched in that way, given a party whenever she waved and raised her little arms, breathed just like the rest of us, turned to hear a voice she knew, the news, the news. It was a marvel how cleanly and completely this lifted her out of the stream of regular life. She was a gleaming, sterilized instrument, flashing out at the precise moment of emergency. She chugged hot hospital coffee and then went, like George Clooney on ER, like she was off to go slice out the tumor that had been lately pressing on the world's optic nerve. She wanted to stop people on the street and say, do you know about this? You should know about this. No one is talking about this. Okay, or she was a gleaming instrument until the moment she shut her bedroom door at night, at which point she exploded into a white mist of tears and strange gasping sounds that were a million years before or after language. For she had spent the last 2 years letting things sink in, and now, guess what, bitch? Further absorption was no longer possible. All day she drank in information, but no one was telling them the main thing. No one was telling them how long they would have her, how long the open cloud of her would last. A feeling like 1,000 flickering kisses, and how long could she bear it? She had only lasted a few minutes with her feet in a tub of doctor fish before she whipped her legs out in a frenzy, saying that they were going too far, that they were eating more of her than other people. The girl at the desk had tried to stop her, telling her how soft she would soon be, that if she was only patient, she would be nibbled back to her original state. But she paid with cash and then ran out of the establishment, not even realizing she had lost her flip-flop somewhere on the burning pavement till she was more than a mile away. There was a channel that played the baby in fuzzy black and white, looking like she was about to steal a pack of cigarettes from a convenience store. They tuned into it at night, all of them in their separate beds, and this is what she used to think the angels did, watch the channel that played her. If so much as a sock slipped off the baby, they could call, and God would move into a frame from nowhere and put the sock back on. Her blue and vanilla guest room looked out on the street, and in the corner was a handle of potato vodka and every book she had ever given her sister for Christmas, back to the time they were teenagers. After she finished bursting into a mist, after she anxiously checked the channel that played the baby, she would slosh an inch of warm vodka into a water glass and begin reading. sliding lower and lower in the bed until the sentences undressed and slept, until it no longer frightened her that there was so much not set down in books. I guess I'll go home when the handle of vodka runs out, she told herself, like the opposite of Cinderella, though still slipping into the glass that fit her perfectly. One of the books was a sex diary, which exerted the particular frontier charm of internet writing before 9/11. This sex diarist wore pigtails and had eyes like blue sequins and lacked inhibition entirely. She made New Hampshire sound like a place you wanted to go, an endless orifice among black ice, buzzing like an open 24 hours sign. Cups of coffee in the morning, adrenaline fueled emails in the afternoon, solitary preparations for threesomes at night. This seemed her whole existence, but was in fact only one room of it. In another was her son, Wolf, who had been born with a microdeletion in one of his chromosomes. In one of those unforgivable intimacies that the modern age allowed us, she looked up the woman and her son every few years to find out what? Wolf was still alive, and the last time she checked, he had become a Christian, painted marvelous self-portraits, and constantly monitored the weather. It always makes me feel safe because if I don't listen to it, how will I know what's going to happen? She looked them up again. She couldn't help it. Tell me more about the apocalypse, Wolf's mother asked him in an interview. If people are worshiping the devil in the form of witchcraft and bad movies, then God would burn the earth when he comes here. But we would be safe in the gates of the holy city. The weather is sunny there and warm, but we wouldn't feel it the way we do now because we wouldn't be in the form our bodies are in now. No sickness and broken bones. We'd be flying through the warmth more than walking. We would still have our heart and soul, which would feel love and happiness, but doesn't touch things the same way, doesn't feel hurt. Everyone would be vegetarian, so animals would be free. We'd have a new earth, all pure and sweet, and it would only be spring and summer. No air pollution. A dream where she herself was pregnant and was seized with panic when she realized that she had been drinking and smoking the whole time. A cigarette was unfolding like a paper crane between her fingertips. An ice cube shook geologically in her glass. A flat red light came through her window and then illuminated her stomach so that she was see-through. And in the cushion of ocean inside her was the baby, with the larger head and the long, froggy limbs facing upward. And the rose of the world mouth asked her, nearly laughing, "Why are you doing this to us?" That magnifying liquid at nighttime saved her, but at dawn she had to haul her own body out of her bed like a jailer by the scruff of the neck and yelling, "Morning, sunshine!" For in order for life to continue, she had to get to the hospital as soon as possible. Her right hand curled permanently around the close to burning cup of coffee, rushing through red lights side by side with her mother, hearing that cover of Toto's Africa on the radio, trying not to join in, but then breaking down and howling, "I bless the rains." What did a story mean to the baby? It meant a soft voice, reassurance that everything outside her still went on, still would go on, that the blood of continuity still pumped, that the day ran in its riverbed. Her blue eyes rolled when the voice of the story came. And sometimes she shook with what must have been excitement, trying in her tininess to be as large as what pressed in on her. In the dome of her head, the mercury of all things was trying to tremble together. Seizures, the doctor said, and administered phenobarbital. And then she stared at him over her nose like a seagull, because if he wanted her to name 100 saints and desert mystics who were epileptic, she could do it, starting with the letter A. Once when she was reading aloud, she came upon a chapter where a little girl died and went up to heaven and, quote, received all the news of the world from the birds, end quote. It was not in her nature to skip, so she kept going in a tinier and tinier voice until the sound grew so small even the birds could not carry it. But the baby never noticed a thing. She could barely recall her previous life, the flights through blue, rare space, the handing over of tickets and stamping of passports, the gorgeous, violent ruptures of somewhere elseness. Even less could she remember what she did when she wasn't on the move. All she could see was herself with a notebook, painstakingly writing, "Oh my God, Thor's hammer was a chode metaphor," with a feeling of unbelievable accomplishment. Through the membrane of a white hospital wall, she could feel the thump of the life that went on without her, the hugeness of the arguments about whether you could say the word retard on a podcast. She laid her hand against the white wall, and the heartbeat, strong and striding, even healthy. But she was no longer in that body. "I was with you. I felt I was a part of it until..." The next door neighbors had a concrete goose in their front yard that they dressed up according to mood and season. a yellow slicker when it rained, a basket of colored eggs on Easter, a miniature jersey on game day. She posted about it one morning just to let people know she was still alive, and a reporter called to interview her for the sort of feel-good story that would give people in the portal an excuse to look away from the news. The goose is prepared for every occasion, she said grandly, pacing the smoking section in front of the hospital with a cup of coffee in her hand. It has an outfit for every kind of day that could ever pop up on the human calendar. But when the reporter asked what she was doing in Ohio, she found herself speechless, all cute little costumes of language gone. For how would you dress up a goose for this? On the television in the NICU waiting room, a report that the dictator had finally gone too far. The next day, on the television in the NICU waiting room, a report that no, he hadn't, and in fact, that it was no longer possible to go too far. A father in highly regional camouflage switched from the news to ancient aliens, where it was being posited that the metaphor of death as Grim Reaper came from aliens in our cornfields spraying pathogens over medieval peasants. The man watched. She watched the man. Some needle in his face moved steadily from possible to plausible to I would die for this belief, which was bewildering until you remembered the wild beeping of his daughter's machines. Another baby in the NICU was named Bo, and he sobbed when he was left alone, but laughed when other people came. Every day, the nurses brought a mirror to Bo, and he looked into it and laughed uproariously until it actually did start to seem funny. The unlikeliness of it all, the fact they were all there together. Where's Bo? There's Bo. Oh, there he is. Bo's mother called his feeding tube his cheeseburgers. It was important to do things like that. If you didn't call your baby's feeding tube his cheeseburgers, then somehow the feeding tube won. Her husband, when he flew up for a weekend visit, found himself physically incapable of being in the NICU for more than an hour. I never realized how strong a baby's agenda was before, he said moodily, the words stop it visible just near his hairline. To make you calm, to make you feel as if nothing in the outside world was wrong, a whole room of them, well, you've got no chance. Ableism, her husband said, encountering this concept for the very first time. Moby Dick was ableist to Captain Ahab? No, she said, her head in her hands. No, 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 no. His grasp of such subjects had always been limited. He believed, for instance, that sexism was when someone was mean to Mary Tyler Moore. All I know is this, he told her, shifting the baby instinctively into the crook of his elbow so her oxygen levels would rise, blue as the sea, to 98%. You can never call me daddy again. In her photo roll, between pictures of the baby appearing to smile, was a picture of perfect juggalo makeup imprinted on a woman's bare ass. Look at her beautiful face. Look how wise, she would tell people, total strangers, scrolling quickly past the picture of the woman's hole. The heart grew. It hurt where it hit the limit of the individual. It tried to follow the pathways as far as they would go. It tried not to know. Looking at the baby, she sometimes believed that nothing was wrong or could ever go wrong, that they were on a planet together where this is simply what a baby was. Then she traveled back to Earth with the baby in her arms, and she gripped her stomach in pain because suddenly the sweet, small body was a jagged heap of jigsaw puzzles in the bottom of her belly that she must put together, keep putting together at every moment, wave after wave of that pain in the stomach, solve into a picture of the sea. What did we have a right to expect from this life? What were the terms of the contract? What had the politician promised us? The realtor walking us through being's beautiful house. Could we sue? We would sue. Could we blow it all open? We would blow it all open. Could we post about it? Her father holding the baby, sweating, panicked. Had he ever held a baby before? And then handing the bundle back to her after a mere 5 minutes. She looks so happy in your arms, he said, not like mine. She knew the words that wanted to come next. You were made for this, sweetheart. Why didn't you ever? But as a gift, he did not give them to her, not this time. Here, I'll show you what she liked, she told her father, and set her phone next to the baby's ear and played music for airports, the music streaking like a bird from one end of the terminal to the other. She only knows what it is to be herself, they kept repeating to each other. The rest was about them and what they thought a brain and a body ought to be able to do. When the neurologist in that first ever meeting had gently said that maybe the baby would one day be able to count to 3, she almost turned the table over on her, because who needed to count to 3? Look what counting to 3 had gotten us. I'm warning you. We can take her to the Cincinnati Zoo, she said, flashing on in the dark like a light bulb. We can put her in the double stroller with her oxygen tank on one side and wheel her through the crowds. When we get to the elephant enclosure, we can wrap a finger around her finger and squeeze to show her how the little ones hold on to their mothers. Yes, said her sister, looking like her very young self again for a moment, and bowed her head for such a long time that it seemed she was going to cry. We can also mourn Harambe. For whatever lives we lead, they do prepare us for these moments. The great gift of the baby knowing their voices, contentless entirely except for love, how she turned so wildly to where the pouring and continuous element was, strained her limbs toward the human sunshine, would fight her way through anything to get there. Different. Yes, different. But we were going to be different. The future had asked it of us. We had already begun to change, and there was almost no human being, so unlike other human beings, that did not know what a kiss was. The baby kicked her legs past other legs, punched her fists past other fists, windmilled her arms, climbed the air like a staircase, plucked idly at the pale hair on the back of her head. It was the baby whose movements were designed for a new and unimagined landscape. The baby who was showing us how to blast off and leave, how we would fly, touch down, pick flowers in other places. But please, not yet. We liked it here. I want a year, her sister said fiercely. I want 1 year. When for so long the rest of us had been thinking only how to skip ahead till the dictator was gone, how to lie down and sleep in a glass rectangle among roses till a bearable reality returned. Her brother-in-law and sister spent late pink hours decorating the baby's nursery, though they knew she might never get a chance to sleep there. The theme they had chosen was swans, serene and graceful, though the only swan she had ever personally met had stared her down outside the Kafka Museum in Prague and then attacked. It had chased her all the way down to the water, its half a heart neck stretched out in a scream. But of course, she had understood later, its nest must have been somewhere near. If she stops breathing, it's just because she's forgotten that it's something she's supposed to do, the pregnant nurse told them on their very last day in the NICU. When that happens, just slap her cheeks very softly. Just give her a little pinch on the fingernail. Don't sit under the apple tree. He was the boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B. It spoke of something deep in human beings, how hard she had to pinch herself when she started thinking of it all as a metaphor. They loved best to dress her precious head in pink polka dot leopard print turbans until she looked like a psychic, until she looked like a little golden girl who had lived 100 years, who stared out from underneath with the skepticism that came from having seen everything. Instantaneous citizen of the flash of lightning that wrote across the sky, I know. And that's the end of that chapter. I really love that chapter. I think it's so tender and it's so incredibly written. So thanks for listening, and I will see you hopefully before too long.